90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today, we'll be going to interview the Scott Limmer. He's a criminal defense attorney. He's also the author of the new book, Keeping Kids Safe and Out of Trouble, and it applies to students in college and high school and graduate programs. He's been a criminal defense attorney on Long Island and New York for over almost 30 years, and he is also heavily involved in defending students when they may be accused of various things in an academic setting. Scott, welcome back to Law You Should Know.
Thanks. Very much happy to be here.
What prompted you to write this book, Keeping Kids Safe and Out of Trouble?
So, it's interesting. So I've been a criminal defense attorney for 25 years. You gave me 5 too many years there. So, but I've been doing it for 25 years. And, if anybody gets in trouble, I've represented them, whether it's in criminal court, whether it's a juvenile, whether it's young people in high school, college. And I wanted to let other people know what I know, all the reality of what happens when you get in trouble, and hopefully be able to explain to parents how they can have conversations with their kids about these difficult subjects instead of just closing their eyes and hoping everything goes okay. I always think it's a good idea to have these conversations. And
also, students and young people are going to be better served themselves by following your advice and knowing your advice before they're in a situation, because afterward you can just defend them and it may be harder to undo the mess they may in, even if they're innocent.
Very true. It's easy to represent someone on the back end. It's nice to get information to people so they understand the right decisions they should make when they're dealing with the police, when they're dealing with their school and other students.
As they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and your tips are going to be very important to them and their families and, of course, their friends. Let's talk about some of the problems and situations that college students get themselves involved in, and I know you extricate them from many of these problems, but what are some of the most common dangerous scenarios?
So one we can talk about first is plagiarism and academic misconduct. That's an enormous problem in schools right now. What I find is that there's an incredible amount of plagiarism and academic misconduct in high schools that goes unfound. Schools don't really use plagiarism checkers, and a lot of kids do work together, and it's not found. They get to college and they keep doing the same thing, and they don't realize what they're doing is against the code of conduct, and they wind up getting in trouble for doing things together, or more nefarious things like that, like, being on text change during tests, or, just blatantly copying things. And there's some schools really have no tolerance for it and will suspend or expel you for something like that. So students need to really understand how plagiarism and academic misconduct works in their school.
And sometimes is it as simple as giving credit where credit is due in a footnote or a bibliography or something?
Yeah, usually, I find I don't get a lot of calls for that, because I think that's handled on a level where a professor or a TA will say to the student, hey, you made a mistake, you do this, don't mess it up next time. It's more, they run a paper through a plagiarism checker and it comes back as 78% plagiarized from other sources or something like that.
So if they just change enough and put in some footnotes, they may save themselves a problem.
Well, I'm sure that plenty of kids aren't getting in trouble for plagiarizing. I think it's the most obvious ones, and I think professors are frustrated by it because it's so easy for students to do work together now. During a test, you'll have half the students in the class on a text chain, texting back and forth the answers to each other. So, it's hard to combat that for them.
Another issue you cover in your book is the social host responsibilities, and that, if there's an adult or an owner, if things get a little wild and there's a lot of alcohol and it's shared or provided to others and perhaps damage to a house, that maybe it's a borrowed or rented house, there can be consequences all around, including different social host laws that can come back to haunt the facilitator.
So if there's an adult in the home and they knowingly provide alcohol or knowingly know that alcohol is being consumed on their property, they can be held responsible criminally for a violation of a social host law. I know usually it's not that serious, but I always find truthfully that it's not necessarily the arrest. It's community outrage, or everybody knows that you're the guy that got arrested. Nobody really wants to have that. But then there's also the civil liability of it. If, God forbid, something happens at your home, or, after someone's at your home drinking, you're probably going to be sued and have some sort of civil liability. So, but this is something I think is very important to talk to your kids. I don't, lots of kids, forget about the parental liability for a second. I think lots of kids will drink. I think lots of kids will drink in their home. They'll come home from college. They will do what they used to doing in college. And I think parents closing their eyes and just saying, oh, that's not going to happen. I think you need to have conversations with your kids. Well, you're not legal to drink, but let me ask you this hypothetically. If you had some friends here when I wasn't here and you were drinking, how would you make sure they got home safe? That's the most important thing. Oh, Dad, they're coming. They're going to sleep over. Okay, great. Oh, they're going to take Ubers, or their parents are picking them up. Okay, fine. Again, you're not allowing it to happen, but you're making sure your kids are making smart decisions.
And along that line, is it also good to discuss with them what if someone has a little too much, or what if someone appears to be out of it medically, perhaps from having too much, just to take effective action?
Without a doubt, I think it's this isn't stay out of trouble. This is everybody needs to be safe. And if somebody's showing some sort of bad signs, it's better be safe than sorry. Call an ambulance, or if you're not sure if they're young kids, call a parent, let them know what's going on, and let them see what if medical attention is actually necessary.
But don't let them go off driving. Don't let them go off walking when they may not be capable of doing so.
Right, exactly. Don't you talk to your kids about them being safe and them being smart if they're going to do things like this. It's tough as a parent. You're not allowed to allow it, but yet you know it's going to happen. So you want to make sure that everybody's safe. And
you want to tell them that as a parent, you'll give them a lift if they're ever in a difficult situation, they're not able to drive, they're out somewhere. You'll come pick them up, no question asked. You want them to be safe. Well,
I think that's why parents are in their kids' business so much to a degree on this topic. I think that the concern is, we've all seen or heard about tragedies, and the reality is, I'm 53 years old, and when I was a teen, drunk driving wasn't the taboo that it is now. And I think people of this age have grown with that, and they see how wrong it is, and they desperately don't want their kids to drive and get into an accident or hurt anybody. So that's why all parents we're always, listen, if you're going to do something, you're not going to get in trouble with me. I just want you to be safe.
And again, if some unknown to you or your kid, if someone had some kind of drug or in their system and they're out of it, let's say at a house, you want to get them first aid or medical attention in case there's some intervention that will help them. And without that intervention, they'll be in a much worse place.
It's you don't know what's going on sometimes. You don't know, did someone just drink too much and they're sleeping on the couch, or did somebody take some sort of drug that's affecting them? Is this a real problem, or is their breathing slowing down or something like that? So it's tough. Kids need to be. It's tough for young people to make good decisions and do the right thing. And the right thing usually is, call a parent or get help in those situations.
You just want to keep the situation from taking a turn for the worse or from getting worse.
That's right. You don't ignore it. You don't let it go. To flip topics. If you think about what happened, I can't remember what school it is, but wherever it was where that pledge was they made him drink and he fell down the stairs and they ignored him and they I think it was Penn State and he wound up dying. Here because kids didn't want to get in trouble for drinking because they're underage, they allowed someone to die. It's a disgrace.
And you don't have to make a confession. You can just summon aid for that person, and whatever their issue was, give some information about what the possibilities could be.
Yeah, right. You're not going to get how much trouble are you going to get into because you were drinking in your fraternity house or you were drinking underage or whatever. So you get your slap on the wrist and you deal with it. It's way better than somebody getting hurt or dying.
And also, is there a line there that the students or the fraternity should not cross in making it into a hazing situation? If someone needs to end it or it's proving too much for them, should they cut them off or help them?
Yeah, I talk about in the book, this is another difficult situation. Your child's a freshman in college or even before. They go, I want to be in a fraternity. I want to be in a sorority. And the reality of a lot of these groups is there is going to be hazing. You're sending your child into this environment where illegal actions are going to take place, and it's worthwhile, if that's what they're going to do, to have a conversation with them and say, listen, you need to know your limits. You need to know how much you can drink. You need to know how much physical activity you can do. You need to tell them that you have asthma or something along those lines, because you want your child to be safe.
And does the fraternity need that to realize those safety parameters also?
I don't. They should, but certainly I can't imagine they're asking, hey, are you healthy enough to do this or that? I don't know.
But as you mentioned in your book, some of these situations can lead to criminal. If they get out of hand, can lead to criminal charges, can lead to death or injury. So for that reason, is important that the other people in the fraternity, even though something may be not intentional, just to be aware of crossing that line.
Yeah, I think people need to keep their wits about them. If you have a child who's in the fraternity, forget about, the pledging, but in the fraternity and being the one doing, new member initiation activities, let's say, as they like to say, you need to tell your child, you better watch out what goes on there. You better make sure you're not too intoxicated or on drugs that you can't understand what's going on. And if something gets out of hand, you need to stop it, because you're going to get in trouble and wind up ruining your life from it. So it's not an easy thing to try to deal with.
And that's the bottom line, and that's the message I think you're trying to communicate as a criminal defense attorney. They may not realize the consequences for their own futures, the civil and the criminal consequences, and also possibly psychological ones. So they have to just be aware of that. Be aware of what's going on and what situation they're in and what they're imposing on other people.
I agree. When I was a kid, I told my parents, hey, I'm pledging a fraternity. And we never really had any discussions about it. It was things happened that were definitely irresponsible. And it's people are doesn't really happen anymore. It shouldn't happen anymore. Parents should discuss these things with their kids to make sure that they don't go too far.
And unfortunately, we in the news, we do hear about situations every year where people are pushed too far, they're in jeopardy, they're ignored, and unfortunate consequences result.
I don't understand. I have to be honest with you. Like I said, I was in a fraternity. I don't understand how Greek life still exists. It's not a secret. Maybe some of the fraternities and sororities don't haze them, but that's what happens. That's the initiation into the group. It's usually a semester full of hazing, and I don't know how this still exists in this day and age. I really don't.
It's a very precarious situation. I just want to remind our listeners, you're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC. I'm interviewing Scott Limmer. He's a criminal defense attorney in Mineola. He's the author of a book, Keeping Kids Safe and Out of Trouble, with tips for parents and kids in high school, college, and beyond. Another situation you deal with in the book, you deal with many relevant situations, but is consensual or non-consensual intimate situations and how they can lead to trouble for all concerned. So in general and very simply, what advice do you have for people out there, young people out there, on preventing criminal or other liability arising out of these situations?
So the reality is on college campuses, there are certain criminal sex violations. But what I usually deal with is I deal with affirmative consent issues. And what I mean by that is if you're a student in college and you are dealing with any sexual activity, and I tell students before they go to college, and they get all sorts of education about this, but they must be able to show that there was affirmative consent for each and every sexual interaction of whatever is going on. If they're accused of something, there needs to be affirmative consent. They can't just say, "Oh, I know that's what what the other party wanted to do." They have to be able to say, "Well, the other person said this, and the other person moved this way, and I believed I had affirmative consent because of these reasons."
And that other person has to be capable of giving that consent. So if they're drunk or unconscious or something, they're probably not capable of giving the consent.
Well, they're definitely not capable. If a school, most schools' rules will say that if a person is incapacitated, that they are not able to give consent. So if somebody wakes up the next morning and they can't remember what happened, and they were intoxicated, and their friends are like, "Wow, you were really, I can't believe you didn't even know what your name was last night." There's going to be a problem if the person had a partner and they allege there was some sort of sexual interaction.
And again, as you mentioned before, it's good to provide a safety net to these kids, whichever side they're on. If they feel they're in an unsafe situation, a parent should tell them to contact them, and they'll come pick them up, no questions asked, rather than them, making a bad situation even more dangerous for themselves or other people.
Yeah, whatever a parent could do, it's hard for me to try to give specific advice to people in that situation, because there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of things going on, at that point. But people should always feel safe with their parents if they can. To always reach out to them and contact them and talk to them about these things.
And the parents have to, maybe initiate that conversation.
Yeah, well, listen, I think it's important. I think it's an important conversation to have with your kids before they go to college about, sexual interaction. It's a difficult conversation, but I think it's important to say, don't do anything that you don't want to do. Don't feel forced into anything that you don't want to do. If you're uncomfortable with something, tell the other person, even if the other person might be mad or whatever. You have to be true to yourself and not, move forward when you don't want to. And
that's really true for the other behavior we talked before, the drinking or encouraging other people to drink. You've got to draw a line somewhere if you want, and just speak up for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe for a friend, if they need someone to, help them to draw the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, friends should be looking out for each other in college. I think, I think that, especially women should, need to be aware of dangers that they face. But I find that most, that's what happens a lot, that friends look out for friends. And, my youngest daughter's in college in the city, and, her friends, they can track each other on their phones, and they always know where they all are. So they know if they're safe, and they get home safe. So it's wonderful. And
you cover many other things in the in your book, and one of the newer things and timely things is pot, and also driving and vaping and different kinds of things. So talk about some of those issues.
What young people have to remember is that even though pot is legal in places, it's still illegal when you're under 21. Many young people have seemed to have forgotten that, or conveniently are ignoring that. It's a weird thing because it was illegal for so long, and now it's not. And there's, nobody's getting arrested for pot. And, people who are underage could be arrested for it, but the police, at least around here, don't seem to be putting any resources. Well, not arrested, but something. But they're not really putting any resources into it.
And if someone is stopped by the police, you offer tips on how a young person should deal with the police and do's and don'ts. So what are some of those do's and don'ts?
Yeah, I think this is, one of the more important things in the book. And I think this is something that parents don't necessarily think to talk about with their kids. I think, remember anyone listening, remember the first time you were driving in your car and a cop stopped you and your stomach fell into your feet and your your head got light and you were nervous and you were scared and you didn't know what to do. And, maybe someone tries to get out of their car and, police don't want you to get out of your car. I think it's something important that every parent go over and explain. Listen, you need to be safe. Even if you're in the wrong, even if you're in the 100% right and the police are totally wrong for stopping you, you need to obey the police because you don't want any situation to ever get out of hand. So you're never going to.
What are some do's and don'ts, and how do you want to avoid aggravating that situation?
Well, if you're stopped by the police, if you're in your car, you want to pull over safely. You want to try to put your interior light on, not make any moves that might may have the police think that you're doing something that you shouldn't be. Wait till they come to the side of the car, open your window, ask them if they can get your information, and be respectful. That's all. And you'll get out of the situation hopefully without too much of a problem.
Now, if they ask you to get out of the car, do you say why? Do you say no way? What would you drive? What's your best response?
Well, I think it's reasonable to ask. I think officer, you said I was speeding. Why are you asking me to get out of my car? And they may give you an answer, or they may pull you out of your car and ransack your car and look to see if there's anything in it. And the reality is that police have the power, and if they're going to do something, they're going to do it.
If they ask if they can search your car or look in your trunk, what do you recommend?
I always recommend saying no. They're asking because they want to see if something's there, and they're not allowed to do that. So there's no reason to give them the consent. Now, again, that being said, if they want to do it, they're going to do it. And unfortunately, there are many cases I have where my clients, swear to me that the stuff was in the trunk and that the cop says that it was in plain view on the, in the center console.
So anyway, you don't want to give the consent, but if the cops start searching, you're not going to physically stop them.
Right. They're going to do whatever they want to do. You could stand there on the side of the road saying, hey, I told you not to search. They're going to do what they want.
Now, Scott, many of them have cameras on their, they're wearing body cameras. Do you want to ask them to make sure that body camera is activated?
So this is a new thing in Nassau for the last few months, and it's wonderful getting discovery with those body camera information. But yes, you want to ask the officer when something's going on if the body camera is activated. Absolutely.
And if it's not, you want that on, right? Because that's going to give you a record.
And it's also not the worst idea. I always tell people, know how to record on your phone, know how to get to the video or the audio recording. And if you have an interaction with an officer, you don't want to pick up your video camera and shine it right in his face, but have the audio recording just so you know what's going on.
You really have the right to record that interaction, right? It's in public, in a public place, and 100%. You're consenting to it?
The officers do not have to consent to you recording them. They try to stop you, but...
If you had a passenger in your car, can you tell your passenger... videotape?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Without a doubt. If I had a passenger in my car, I would tell them you're in charge. Make sure everything's recorded. I
just remind the listeners, we're talking about keeping kids safe and out of trouble. Our guest is Scott Limmer. He's a criminal defense attorney in Mineola, and he's been in the field over 25 years, and he wrote this most interesting book about keeping kids safe. You've helped with a lot of situations with let's say it escalates, the wrongfully or rightfully the cops arrest a young person or any person. What should their frame of mind be and their attitude be as they're going through the process, from being handcuffed or taken out of their car, put in a patrol car, whatever?
So, it's interesting. I always try to look at a criminal case in two emotional parts for the client. The first is the getting arrested and possibly being held over and seeing a judge and getting arraigned. And then the second is the rest of the case. The client in that first part is incredibly scared because they've never been arrested. They may be going to jail for the evening. They're going to be brought in front of this judge, and they're petrified. They think their world is ending because they really don't understand what's going to happen after that. But my advice to people, and again, what I've told my daughters is I said, if you ever get arrested, if anything ever happens and you can't get in touch with me, the first thing, and we'll come back to this in a second if we can, the first thing is you don't make any statements. The second thing is you just get yourself through the process. I'll be there, when you're in front of the judge, and we will get you out of this situation. And then we'll sit down and figure out what the problem is.
We are going to run out of time in the show, but you want to ask for a desk appearance ticket if you can, so you don't go through the process. You don't want to resist anything physically or verbally because that will escalate the situation. You want to try to cooperate. Let them know if your hands are hurting, if you're having trouble breathing. You don't want to get them to a situation where they're using force on you. You as a criminal defense attorney can, the results of the merit or defenses to it, you can resolve down the road. You just want them to get them through this chapter safely.
That's right. Exactly.
Any other final thoughts, Scott? I know you cover many other things in your book.
My final thoughts is what I wanted to come back to real quick, and I'll say, I think one of the most important things to discuss with your children is let them understand their right to remain silent. That they do not have to give statements to the police, that they do not have to give statements to the people in their school, that instead of doing that, they should use their right, and then they can figure out what to do afterwards.
And they want to contact an attorney, so give us your contact information.
My contact information, anyone could find me online. You just type in Scott Limmer and you'll find me, criminal defense attorney. My phone number is 516-742-2300. My email is scott@limmerlaw.com, and I'm happy to answer anybody's questions and happy to give anybody a free copy of the book. If you're listening and you'd like one, feel free to email me, and I will email you a digital copy of the book.
And it's very good for parents and educators and covers many different situations. And just in case, I just want to make sure everyone is aware, your last name is Limmer. And I'm sure you have much other helpful information on your website.
Yes, there's more information on my website. There's, it explains what happens if you get in trouble for certain things and goes through those things.
And what prompted you to become an expert in this particular field?
I just saw that all these parents that I'd be talking to, and they'd say, if I only knew that my child shouldn't make a statement to the police, if I only knew that they weren't allowed to do this. And I wanted to write it from my perspective. In all honesty, my high school friends and my college friends have a nice advantage because I'm always telling them about things that they should tell their kids. And I wanted everybody to know it. I wanted everybody to understand these things, and I hope they can by reading the book.
And the cops may make you think they're your friends and that they just need a simple explanation and things will go away, but many times it's not that simple, and that's why they need to contact a lawyer. Their parents first if they're a child, and then a lawyer.
What people don't realize about criminal cases and with cops is that the cops don't want to hear your story and then they're going to make a decision to see what they think happened. They only want your story to make the case against you stronger. They already know they want to arrest you.
And whatever you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I want to thank Scott Limmer for being our guest, and thank you for joining us on Law You Should Know here on 90.3 FM, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. If you missed this program, it's available as a podcast along with many others at nccradio.org. And please join us next week at this same time for another program on Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC.